With the 10-year anniversary of the Gilgo Beach serial killing, initial bodies being found, we decided to hold a press conference, and it was a major press conference, to really ask for an outside authority, in this case, New York State Attorney General Letitia James, to do an investigation of the investigation. Anybody who's familiar with this Gilgo Beach or Long Island serial killer case knows that at the very beginning of the case, when the bodies were initially found, is the time that our county executive, Steve Bellone, had hired Jim Burke to be his police chief. Almost immediately, Chief Burke kicked the FBI out of the investigation, something that made no sense to anybody, and it really caused a major problem with the early years of investigation. We've had FBI agents, we've had law enforcement agents from all over this area say it caused a major problem in finding out who committed these crimes and getting justice for the victims.
It's still shocking to this day that, amongst us, it could be someone that, has done these horrific acts, and nothing really has been done that we can see. But here you are, probably the most significant thing that can impact people's lives is people's quality of life and their sense of security. That you have a potential, you have a serial killer. I think you can't even use potential. There are multiple bodies, and he hasn't held one press conference about it. So it tells me, just knowing these characters and being around them and how they operate, there's something more to the story that because he's shying away from it. I can't see why he hasn't embraced it. And there's no downside, right? So if you say, I'm gonna put every resource we have to find the serial killer, people are gonna say, hey, well, you tried. But to not even try, that raises a big red flag to me.
One of the things that struck me even more outrageous perhaps than former Chief Burke kicking the FBI out of the investigation with the FBI's forensic capabilities was the fact that he basically kicked the entire Gilgo Beach task force, the detectives that were involved with these investigations, off the case without allowing them to debrief and tell the new people coming in what had occurred. It's almost like Chief Burke and perhaps his boss Steve Bellone went out of their way to hide what was going on.
I have a lot of insight into all this is because I was a cop for 25 years, 10 of which I was in the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force, which means I didn't go to a police precinct. I went to the FBI every day for almost 10 years. Prior to that, I was in the ATF for 2 years, and in the middle of those two, I was with the IRS for about a year. So most of my law enforcement career, I was actually assigned to federal task forces. There was a guy named Tim Sini who ultimately became the district attorney, but the road to get there is very interesting. He's hired to run against Kevin McCaffrey in a legislative seat. They make him the deputy county executive in charge of public safety. Now, he was for a short time, 2 years, a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. So he leaves the Southern District of New York, becomes the deputy county executive of public safety, Jimmy Burke's boss. So I meet him, and behind the horseshoe at the legislature, and I go, let me get this straight. You're a former federal prosecutor. The Suffolk County Police Department has no one assigned to the FBI Violent Crimes Task Force during MS-13 getting out of control. We have an opiate epidemic getting out of control, people dying everywhere. We have no detectives assigned to the DEA task force because Jimmy Burke took everyone out of those task forces, me being one of them. And he looked and basically shrugged his shoulders. I go, and you're Jimmy Burke's boss? And to make a long story short, he walked outside, sat in the auditorium right next to Jimmy Burke and put his arm around him. So for 16 months, Steve Bellone's hand-picked deputy county executive of public safety was Jimmy Burke's boss, and he did nothing about it. Nothing. So what does that tell you about the relationship?
It just boggles the mind that you would put this fox in charge of that hen house under these circumstances, but that's what was done. And no sooner does Burke come in as chief of police in January of 2012, but the FBI is told to leave, the Nassau County Police Department is told to stand down from the investigation. Keep in mind, Nassau County had 2 of those bodies that were found on the Nassau County side of the border along Ocean Parkway. And the Jersey City Police Missing Persons Bureau was told to stand down as well. They were involved because Shannon Gilbert was a resident of Jersey City, New Jersey. All these agencies were pushed away, and Burke alone remained in charge. There was nobody to question Burke, and the judgment calls made by the police department once Burke was in charge. Therein lies the first and one of the greatest problems of the entire investigation of the disappearance of these girls and Shannon Gilbert. All of them are murdered, and the police have boggled that investigation once Burke was in it.
About a month after the election, it was obvious to myself and Commissioner Dormer that we were going to be replaced. The commander of the Internal Affairs Unit, who reported directly to me, came down to my office to tell me that Chris McPartland, the Assistant District Attorney, had called him up and requested all of Jimmy Burke's files. I thought it was very suspicious. I told the CEO of IA to call McPartland back and tell him which one does he want, the originals or the copies, but he's certainly not going to get both. McPartland didn't bother calling back. I guess he realized that he couldn't keep them hidden, as all he could tell us was that he didn't want anybody looking at him.
The $64,000 question is, why did Steve Ballone pick and then stick with Jimmy Burke as the police chief? He was warned, and I know he was warned because I was sitting in a room where my sergeant, Timmy Gosloff, and I penned a letter to Kevin Law, who was on the search committee for the new police commissioner, Steve Ballone, and various other people who were on that search committee, describing in detail the indiscretions that Jimmy Burke had done. And you know, Ballone received the letter and obviously didn't look at it. I mean, he knew he could have easily went to the police commissioner and said, give me Jimmy Burke's IAB file, personnel file, I want to look at it. Now, who would hire someone if they didn't look at their personnel file? Nobody. So what does that tell you? Something's going on there. There's something wrong. When I first met Jimmy Burke, I believe it might have been the first time I met him, I'm not sure. It was on the street. I was a very young cop in plain clothes, and he had just been transferred out of the 1st precinct into the 4th precinct, and the reason he was transferred was because he was having sex with prostitutes in a police car.
Very important here. Tanya Lopez had suspected or had heard through the grapevine rumors of Jim Burke's ties to prostitution, but she never had any concrete leads or evidence to track it down. When I came in with the year it happened, how he got moved from one precinct to the other, how he got busted in rank, she was amazed at how I knew all this. And as it turns out, she confirmed it. It was absolutely true. And she actually did run an article, which I believe was in November of 2012, where they did then tie Jim Burke to prostitution. Not using my name, not using anybody's name, but she verified the fact that he was tied to the prostitution.
Steve Ballone has allegedly made a phone call to Newsday trying to kill a story that his police chief, James Burke, had perjured himself in a civil suit. I believe they have more proof of that. Of course, Steve Ballone, amnesia strikes, and he says he doesn't recall that phone call. I do not believe it, and I think that that phone call actually took place. It's further proof that Steve Ballone went out of his way to protect James Burke and keep him as his police chief, thereby hurting the Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer investigation.
She kept working the case, and in April of 2014, she contacted me and she said, we're going with a full page, front page story on Sunday Newsday. And it was the middle of April. She goes, about your story, meaning my name would be mentioned now. And that was it. So I figured, okay, we're going to get this great story on Sunday news edition of Newsday. So the Sunday paper comes and no story. I'm going, what happened? And Pete calls me up that day. He's totally pissed off also at the story didn't run. He knew about it. And that's when he told me, he says, Guy, he says, they got to Newsday.
Why would Steve Ballone hire someone like Jimmy Burke to be police chief? I think from all we know and learned about him is that he has something on Steve Ballone. It's something that frightens him so much that he made him the police chief. He was the J. Edgar Hoover of the Suffolk County Police Department. Of Of course he had dossiers. That's all he did. They used to put guys out there collecting intelligence. Do I know about Burke and Malone and Strickoff at the same table, coming up together with a plan to make him the chief of the department? Yeah, I heard that. And it sounds very feasible to me that that's exactly what happened. Strickoff, he's in with them so deep. You know, we could trace his play all the way back to the time when he bought the house from Harry Feingold. That was a good one. And paid double the price for it in Oak Beach. What the hell was that all about? And the feds never did anything with it. The house was only worth $4 1/4. Strikeoff paid $8 1/4. That was some kind of a scam. Harry Feingold is a known prolific drug dealer who did time for it. He's also went into the pornography business, the Russian bride business. He was a thief in general. If you're hanging out with Strickoff, chances are you're dirty, in my opinion. What is he doing now? Does anybody know? What nice little cushion did he fall into now to keep him going?
Near the end of 2016, I was contacted by the U.S. Attorney's Office, one of the federal prosecutors, and asked to come into the Eastern District in Central Islip, where they wanted to ask me quite a few questions, mostly regarding Steve Ballone and Bobby Strickoff and their activities at Oak Beach. I don't think that it's as important to tell you what I had to say, but what was more important was that they wanted to know, that they were asking these particular questions. They asked about a number of people, but most of the information and most of the questions were regarding our county executive, Steve Ballone, and his friend, Robert Strickoff.
I've said this from the beginning. Either the Suffolk County Police are inept or they're covering something up, and it's blatantly apparent that they're covering something up. I've lived here my whole life. You talk about Strickoff and Ballone. Well, where does Strickoff have his house? It's at the other end of Oak Beach. This place has been a haven for politicians, and it's been, the rewards of a political career a lot of times ended with a house or something at Oak Beach. Unless you're from here and can really put the pieces all together, people don't realize how incestuous this is. From the town of Babylon to the Suffolk County Police to the Suffolk County DA, all these people are tied together. Burke, Ballone, Spoda, Hackett, Bissett, they're all tied to the hip, and the common denominator is drugs, is women, their love of partying, their love of beating the system. Think about it. Once you have the police and the politicians that control the police in your pocket, how do you get caught? You don't.
The answer we want to find out is he in bed with them? Was there something that they had on him that was true, that he couldn't go there? Or was it that the fact that he had done things with him? You know, everyone knows, I have it hanging on the wall right there, that when you first gave money to Steve Ballone in his first and second, I think, county executive runs, you mailed it to his friend's house, Robert Strickoff's house, which was on Oak Beach, which was just a short distance away from where these bodies were found. Now, I have no knowledge of what went on at these parties. I wasn't there, but there are women who said they were there at this house, the same house where you sent your campaign contributions. Apparently this woman went with a news organization, pointed out the house, and said, yes, that's the house where Jimmy Burke strangled me or choked me. Now, that would be some reason to be for concern that they're choking someone at a house that presumably is Robert Strickoff's, Burke's friend, and it's right down the road. Now, maybe, I don't know, I'm not saying Ballone was there, I have no knowledge of any of that, but it seems to me maybe that's the reason he didn't fire him.
The question gets to all of us: has anything gone right with this investigation? And we find that one of the bodies, there was a controversy about the cause of death of Shannon Gilbert. Initially, it was supposed to have been accidental drowning. Then an independent autopsy suggested the possibility of strangulation. Then Chief Burke himself starts making life miserable for the FBI agents and unceremoniously dumps them when he became police chief. Who knew about it and why?
The only time I heard from any investigator in this case was when I brought Dr. Michael Bodden, one of the greatest medical examiners, coroners in the history of our country. I brought Michael into the case to essentially perform an autopsy of Shannon's remains. Michael Bodden issued a finding that Shannon's death was consistent with homicide and that it was unlikely that she died of natural causes. Once we announced that, I finally received a call for the first time from any member of the investigation. The homicide squad wanted to work with me now that Bodden had made this statement. That was a Friday night, right after I had held my press conference with Bodden. He never called me back again. So I called him and my phone calls were ignored. That was the only connection I ever had with any investigator from the police department.
I have never seen an administration which has interacted and interfaced with federal investigators and then threw them off the case for the serial investigations. To this date, that has not been explained, and in fact is not even mentioned. And then they announced that they're bringing the federal investigators back to the serial killings at Gilgo, and they really haven't. And then to the point where, as we started out, a state Senate member has asked the state attorney general to look into this investigation, and she's backed away from it too. What is going on, and why is it taking so long? It's inexcusable.
I sent 3 letters. The first letter was sent to County Executive Steve Bellone asking, number 1, why he never fired James Burke when his police chief kicked the FBI out of this incredibly important investigation. I've never heard a response from County Executive Bellone. The second letter went to then Police Commissioner Stuart Cameron, asking if Chief Burke had ever been questioned. Very simple answer to this, yes or no. I do not believe any of Chief Burke's subordinates were going to sit him down and say, Chief Burke, awkward conversation, but where were you on the night Megan Waterman went missing, or Shannon Gilbert? I don't believe it ever happened. To this day, over 10 years later, we have never heard from the Suffolk County Police Department that their former chief, James Burke, has been cleared. My third letter was to New York State Attorney General Letitia James, asking that she do an investigation of the initial investigation. For her office to find out why Burke kicked the FBI out and what happened as a result of that harmed the investigation. I never heard from County Executive Steve Bellone. I never heard from our former commissioner now, Stuart Cameron, but I did hear from Letitia James' office. Our New York State Attorney General, to her credit, contacted my office right away when they received the letter and been working with us to try and find a way for her to do the investigation.
It is a tremendous stain on Suffolk County's reputation, on the quality of life, if you will, of our community, to have multiple serial murder victims and their families still not having the justice of closure, still not having the public officials who are sworn to uphold the law to get to the bottom of what happened all these years. It's astonishing. There are no communities that really have this kind of mystery that lingers, that we can link to the inaction, if not the deliberate cover-up, of certain individuals in public office.
I would just like to say to the families of the victims who reached out to me and those that did not, we want you to know that we support you, we want to protect you from any further problems with this case. Your family members, the victims that you love so much, deserve justice, and they will have justice. It's been a long road, but I do think we're getting near the answers between the individuals that are on the case now and the technologies that we have. I believe the answer is coming. Again, I am sorry for your loss, and you will get justice soon.